Raw Talk is opinion-based, and everyone is encouraged to do their own research. Welcome into the first episode of Raw Talk. I'm Arthur Raw. You might know me from Discussion Combustion. Happy Friday, America. This is going to be a solo project for me that I'm really excited to get started. And on this episode, I want to cover why do anything at all? Why have a purpose in life? And why am I doing this show? It's actually part of my purpose. And I'm going to explain how I found my purpose, and that was overcoming opiates. And I'll dive into that subject. But it's really important to have central focus in our lives and make sure that we're trying to chase something. Like, I've spent time on the couch, and there's nothing wrong with spending some time on your phone or watching movies or playing video games. There's nothing wrong with focusing on nothing. It's good to zone out. And so I don't want to completely disregard the importance of relaxing and turning our brains off. However, if we don't have a purpose in life, then we tend to feel a little bit empty, and this could create empty friendships. This can create empty relationships with significant others, or maybe our family too. If we're not really pursuing something that we are driven to do, that when we think about what we just did, it puts a little smile on our face, then we're missing out on life. We're missing out on the experience. So my purpose that I discovered, and this is relatively new in my life, less than 2 years ago, I discovered that my purpose is to share my story of addiction, and that was with painkillers, opiates, and share that story and show people that you can get off of this stuff, that you can change your life, regardless of if it's opiate, if it's overeating sugar, if it's alcohol, if you are, you have a anger management issue, a sex addiction, whatever it may be. To see somebody walk the path and to be vulnerable is a powerful thing. And I did not know this was my calling until more recent times in my life. So that is what I feel my purpose is. And like I said, everyone's purpose can be different, and our purposes might change as we continue as well. And that's why it's so important to have an open mind to your own thoughts and have a vulnerability to your own emotions, to actually be honest with yourself. So I'm going to cover how it got bad for me. How did I get into the worst position of my life, where I had my vehicles repoed, multiple vehicles. I completely tanked my credit. I was in toxic relationships, overweight, living in my parents' house. And there can be circumstances where that's fine, right? But for me, I knew that there wasn't happiness there. So it got really bad for me. And starting off with the opiate journey, I started when I was 17. And it was relaxed back then. You could get this stuff anywhere. Every parent had some kind of script in their medicine cabinet. So, kids would grab these things and get a hold of them, share them with their friends. And that's how I first had it. Now, for painkillers specifically, I'm going to speak to this drug specifically. You either feel like shit and you want to vomit when you eat these things, or it makes you feel like euphoric and like this warm feeling from your solar plexus out. Unfortunately, it felt great. Like, I enjoyed it. So I made excuses for a long time, and I didn't go in deep right in the beginning. It was progressive. So maybe once a month in the beginning, whatever. But as time went on, I started to chase that feeling more. I wanted to chase that feeling more. And I would make excuses. I was in sales, and I felt like the added emotion that I felt from taking painkillers, I felt like that made me better at sales. So I justified my usage, and I did that for years, a long time. And with that came a dependence to where I didn't feel like I could sell whatever it was without taking this product. I remember I was selling cars was when it was at its very worst, because I would be working to pay for a lot of painkillers, and then I would be taking painkillers to work because it helped me stay motivated. And it was a vicious cycle, and I did that for too long. As I kind of mentioned, I tanked my credit. I had cars repoed, and it was getting really bad. That had been about 17 to 28 right there. And when I turned 28, I was still using opiates. However, that's when I had a critical moment where I admitted that I was an addict. I admitted that this substance was taking control of my life, and already had. That was the biggest step. I'm so fortunate to have my friends to talk to during those times, because we all need somebody. We all need somebody to get through this. So if you don't have anybody, get some help, man. Whatever it is, try to find somebody to talk to. But when I was 28, that's when I realized that I was f***ing up. Like, I never had money. I would literally overdraft my account just so I could get my fix until my next paycheck. And then, like, I would overdraw like $1,000 every single month. And then my paycheck would hit, and then that would, like, get taken out of the paycheck. But it was a vicious cycle. I could go into details on all that horrible stuff for a really, really long time. However, I do want to do my best to keep these episodes as compact and focused as possible. Once I was 28 and I admitted that I had an issue, that's when I started fighting to do the right thing. And I'll be honest, it took me 5 years after that to actually put it down for good and not want it anymore. Like, I don't even want it anymore. And I'll talk about how I feel about the misconceptions of being an addict in just a little bit. But during that 5 years of trying to get off this, it was just a time filled with disappointment. I knew I was doing the wrong thing. I was still going to get it. I was still, broke. Like, how come I can't go afford a meal if I want to eat, Like, why is it hard like that? Why am I willing to spend $120 on one night getting high when I could use that to feed myself for like a whole week? Still being stupid, but at least I knew I had a problem. So it took 5 years of that type of behavior. I was just disappointing myself, and I knew it at that point. And I was pretty selfish through the whole thing, but I was also disappointing my family. I had lied to loved ones. I'd stolen. Like, really was a piece of shit. Like, I was kind of a piece of shit there for a long time. Deep down, I was a good person, but I was just being really selfish, and it was not okay. So after these 5 years of disappointing myself and slowly getting off this stuff, it was progressive. So, like, I remember the last year that I was taking them, I really slowed it down, and thank God to the pandemic. Like, go figure, the pandemic helps me get off this. Also starting the podcast, Discussion Combustion, had a place for me to be accountable. Like, I want to be a good person that isn't fake. Like, I want to be real. And I lied on Discussion Combustion for a whole year that I was saying I was clean, and I wasn't. And I owned up to that too on an episode. I forget which one, but I owned up to that. Because everything catches up. Everything will catch up in life, regardless of what it is. If you're doing good things, it's going to catch up in a good way. If you're doing bad things, you're going to pay the price. And that's just the way it goes, man. So after this journey in 2020 of really spacing out my usage, I didn't have withdrawals anymore. And I understand that that's a tough area to be in. It's like the gray. You're stuck in the gray. And you can't see the light in the day. Everything sucks. So you have to get through that. And you have to understand that, like, it just is going to suck for a while. But once you actually decide that you're better off without it, I remember I was having nightmares for months when I was trying to get off this stuff. And after I quit finally too, I still had these nightmares where I would be having fun in my dream, And, you know, when you're high on opiates, like, people nod off. Like, they can't keep their eyes open. They're falling asleep. Like, they can hear everything. They're cognitive, but they're nodding off. And that's what was happening in my dreams. It was like, oh, the worst. It was the worst. I hated that feeling. And that's one thing that I'll always stay away from it, because of that feeling, not being able to have my eyes open. And the very last time I took one, I felt that feeling live action, and I hated it. And I'll never do, I don't want it again. And I could go off there easy. However, it's about making the change and making it sustainable. I got to a point where I didn't want it anymore. That took me 5 years. It could take you less time. Maybe it takes you more time. But as long as you are progressing and you're trying to do something better, then it's okay if you have a fuck up and you use again or whatever it is. Just keep moving forward. And I got to that point where I was like, I'm only moving forward. And it was a little bit after that when I learned how powerful the story of overcoming an addiction is. And so Raw Talk is really important for me, because I'm gonna vent here. I'm gonna put it out here, get vulnerable, and show people that it's okay to show our emotions, and also show our strength through difficulties, because life is not easy. So I wanted to open up and really share that part of me, because it really did shape where the rest of my life would go. With overcoming it, I knew that there would be a new responsibility in my life. You have a void that's created when you remove something that used to be a huge central focus for you. And my void was filled in with mostly positive things, but alcohol did sneak in there. I did start drinking more when I got off opiates. I'll tell another story later about how I started to overcome my overusage of alcohol, but that's not for this episode. But you have to start doing the right things. And that's when I really started to realize, through the podcast, through all this stuff. I used to make music when I was a kid, and I always wanted to have a positive message to help people. That's always been in the back of my mind, even when I was younger. Like, I always thought about that. Since I was like 11, I've been thinking about this. And I got in my own way for a really, really long time. And I don't regret that. I don't even regret that one bit, because it really brought me to where I'm at now. And look, I had some fun times off and getting high too. Like, let's not get it twisted. I'm more mature now. I understand that that's not a way to live life anymore. And that's why I want to have this place to talk about it. So it's so important to find your purpose in life. And thank goodness I finally turned the corner on that, and found my purpose, which is to share the story of addiction and show people that you can overcome it. And I really want to touch on this too. There is a misconception with being an addict that I want to break. And that is that once an addict, always an addict. I say that's bullshit. You could be an addict, and then you can break the cycle. We can break the chain. You don't have to be an addict for the rest of your life because you were in your late teens, your early 20s. Why? That's a misconception. And just because society says it doesn't always mean that it's true. We can make up our own rules to this, okay? No one's doing it for us, all right? Even though I had friends, I had people there to lean on, I had to do it by myself. Like, no one is in your head. No one was in my head. I had to do it. And that can be tough some days. If you're really committed, if you're really about it, then you're going to find out by the way that you challenge yourself and the way that you overcome problems and how you handle the shitty days. Because it's not always going to be good. Even when life is great, it's not always going to be good. You know, there's always going to be hard days. That's how I found my purpose. That's what my purpose is. Everybody's purpose will change as this life continues, and everyone has a different purpose. So we all have a lot of freedom with that, but only you know what really makes you smile, what really gets you going. Like something has to exist that just fills you with life, you know? Like I know if I ever hear just one thing, like we on Discussion Combustion, we were talking about this stuff, and just one person wrote in like, hey, after listening to this episode, I didn't do cocaine for a whole month. They were like a month sober. I don't know where they're at now, but they were like sober for so long, and like that meant something to me. So I'm doing this as a little bit of selfishness so I can fulfill my purpose. And this first episode, I wanted to focus on the purpose and also hopefully motivate you to find your own if you haven't already, or maybe refocus what your purpose is if cycles have ended and it's time to focus on something new. Because we have a purpose doesn't mean that will always be that purpose, right? It's interesting to think about it like that. I'm going to cover a lot of really fun topics on this show. I'll get into, I got to get into one of relationships, working out, Star Wars, geeky stuff. I go into Marvel. I'm going to have a lot of fun with this. Raw Talk is definitely something that I'm going to continue to do. It's going to come out on a regular cadence, at least one episode a week. And I am so thankful for everyone's support and anyone who is out there that is in the gray, like you can't see the light in the day. You're not the only one. You're not the only one dealing with that. And you got the strength to get through them. No one's going to do it for you. We got to buckle up and we have to take off here. I'm going to be coming back soon next week. Thank you so much for tuning in to the first episode of Raw Talk. And I want to end it with a question. Do you know your purpose? Let's go, baby. I'll be back next week.